I'm trying to find the right volume. So I should move my mic closer to my face, probably. Instead of being 1,000 miles away. Well, that shouldn't be too loud. Let me know if it is too loud. Now move it. I'll change it. Oh my god, we got Buster Sword Muppet. Look at that. It's my boy with a Zack Bear sword. My special little man. But welcome in, everyone. We're back reading more of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, the 1818 text. Ooh. We're getting closer and closer to October, and I feel like by October we'll be done. We're on volume 3. So I feel like we can get this done by October. Well, maybe not by October. We'll finish at least in... Actually, no. Volume 3 is not that long. Because at the end, there's like a bunch of pages of just like chronology. And a bunch of just like other stuff. I guess of the different versions. Oh, interesting. Sorry, I've gotten distracted. Ooh, suggested further reading. Ooh, that's at the end of the book too. And then we also have Introduction to Frankenstein, the 3rd edition, 1831. Ah, maybe that's why. That must be why all the versions I tried to find online to give you guys were wrong, because they must have been like the 3rd version and this is the 1st. Genesis 2:18-25. There's a Bible verse at the end of this too. And then Prometheus. Oh, maybe we'll read the poem Prometheus at the end. I think that. There's so much stuff at the end, huh? Any idea what I'm gonna read when I finish this one? I'm wondering if Peter Pan is in the public domain. Because I remember like years ago seeing someone read Peter Pan. I'll have to see. We've got the added stipulation that it does need to be in public domain, because I really don't want to get I don't want to face copyright strikes over books, so sticking to things in the public domain. I know Sherlock Holmes is in the public domain. Not every Sherlock Holmes is created equal though, and also I don't have any Sherlock Holmes books, so we'll have to see. Those little chimes going on in the background. But we're starting off on volume 3, chapter 1 of Frankenstein, Mary Shelley's the 1818 text. What has happened last, in case you missed the last reading stream. Well, well, well. Frankenstein has told his life story to Victor Frankenstein. I'm just gonna call him Frankenstein's monster because he doesn't actually have a name. How he's been shunned by every single person he meets. He saves a child and the father shoots him. People run and scream in fear and try and attack him, thinking he's an ugly, ferocious being. And he tells Mr. Frankenstein, is like, you made me like this. You got 2 options. Either I go around and kill a bunch of people in your name, or option number 2, you make me a wife. We leave, we go somewhere remote, and you never hear from us again. I just need someone. I need some form of companionship, and you have to make them for me. They need to be as ugly as I am, so they have no prejudices against me. And Victor Frankenstein's like, ah, dang. No. And Frankenstein's monster's like, excuse me. And Victor Frankenstein was like, okay, sure. And then the monster leaves. And Victor Frankenstein heads back to his family. But as he's walking, he's like, I'm not sure I'm actually going to do it. So I feel like Victor Frankenstein has just lied to the monster's face. Because I think he quickly regretted agreeing to it. Because he's like, dang. His thought process is like, dang. A, it sucks making it the first time. I don't really want to go through all that processing grave robbing again. And number 2, what if both of them just hate humanity? And then we got 2 monsters to deal with. So he's like, oh, I don't really want to make him a wife. I'm gonna ignore this for now and go back to my loving family. Victor Jr., the first victim of the male loneliness pandemic. Oh, I feel so bad for Frankenstein's monster. He genuinely has tried multiple times, even throughout the adversity, to be a good person. He wants to learn things.
Me? Gungaga.
I forgot to turn off Gungaga. Sorry, give me a minute. I'll also turn off the alert sounds too. Just because I don't want that interrupting the reading. There we go. Turn that off. And hello, Katori, welcome in. Your cat keeps jumping on the keyboard. Damn, she really said change the channel. I don't want to hear Frankenstein. Oh. In the tournament, real talk, she met a bunch of like circus people and they taught him how to chill. Honestly, yeah, maybe. If this was set in America, I think you could... To be fair, no, they didn't treat circus people right in America. I'm pretty sure there's like... I'm trying to think of like the correct term. Little people, like... Circuses in places like that, I'm pretty sure like would kidnap them and treat them very not well. So maybe that wouldn't have been the best choice for Frankenstein, you know, being used for profit. Who knows? But I'm gonna take a drink and we're gonna get into chapter 1 of volume 3. Day after day, week after week, passed away on my return to Geneva, and I could not collect the courage to recommence my work. I feared the vengeance of the disappointed fiend, yet I was unable to overcome my repugnance to the task which was enjoined me. I found that I could not compose a female without again devoting several months to profound study and laborious disquisition. I had heard of some discoveries, having been made by an English philosopher, the knowledge of which was material to my success, and I sometimes thought of obtaining my father's consent to visit England for this purpose. But I clung to every pretense of delay, and could not resolve to interrupt my returning tranquillity. My health, which had hitherto declined, was now much restored, and my spirits, when unchecked by the memory of my unhappy promise, rose proportionally. My father saw this strange with pleasure, and he returned his thoughts towards the best method of eradicating the remains of my melancholy, which every now and then would return by fits, and with a devouring blackness overcast by the approaching sunshine. At these moments I took refuge in the most perfect solitude. I passed whole days on the lake alone in a little boat, watching the clouds and listening to the rippling of the waves, silent and listless. But the fresh air and bright sun seldom failed to restore me to some degree of composure, and, on my return, I met the salutations of my friends with a readier smile and more cheerful heart. It was after my return from one of these rambles that my father, calling me aside, thus addressed me. "I am happy to remark, my dear son, that you have resumed to your former pleasures, and seem to be returning to yourself. And yet you are still unhappy, and still avoid our society. For some time I was lost in conjecture as to the cause of this, but yesterday an idea struck me, and if it is well-founded, I conjure you to avow it. Reserve on such a point would not only be useless, but draw down terrible misery on us all." I trembled violently at this exordium, and my father continued, "I confess, my son, that I have always looked forward to your marriage with your cousin as the tie of our domestic comfort and the stay of my declining years. You were attached to each other from your earliest infancy. You studied together and appeared, in dispositions and taste, entirely suited to one another. But so blind is the experience of man that what I conceive to be the best assistance to my plan may have entirely destroyed it. You, perhaps, regard her as your sister. without any wish that she might become your wife. Nay, you may have met with another whom you may love, and, considering yourself as bound in honour to your cousin, this struggle may occasion the poignant misery which you appear to feel. My dearest father, reassure yourself. I love my cousin tenderly and sincerely. I have never saw any woman who excited as Elizabeth does. My warmest admiration and affections. My future hopes and prospects are entirely bound up in the expectation of our union. The expression of your sentiments on this subject, my dear Victor, gives me more pleasure than I have for some time experienced. If you feel thus, we shall assuredly be happy. However, present events may cast a gloom over us, but it is this gloom which appears to have taken so strong a hold on your mind that I wish to dissipate. Tell me, therefore, whether you object to an immediate solemnization of the marriage. We have been unfortunate, and recent events have drawn us from the everyday tranquility befitting my years and infirmities. You are younger, yet I do not suppose, possessed as you are of a competent fortune, that an early marriage would at all interfere with any future plans of honour and utility that you may have formed. Do not suppose, however, that I wish to dictate happiness on you, or that a delay on your part would cause me any serious unease. Interpret my words with candour, and answer me, I conjure you, with confidence and sincerity. I listened to my father in silence and remained for some time incapable of offering any reply. I revolved rapidly in my mind a multitude of thoughts and endeavoured to arrive at some conclusion. Alas, to me the idea of an immediate union with my cousin was one of horror and dismay. I was bound by a solemn promise which I had not yet fulfilled and dared not break, or, if I did, what manifold miseries might not impend over me and my devoted family? Could I enter into a festival with this deadly weight hanging around my neck and bowing me to the ground? I must perform my engagement and let the monster depart with his mate before I allow myself to enjoy the delight of a union from which I expected peace. I remembered also the necessity imposed upon me of either journeying to England or enduring a long correspondence with those philosophers of that country, whose knowledge and discoveries were of indispensable use to me in my present undertaking. The latter method of obtaining the desired intelligence was dilatory and unsatisfactory. Besides, any variation was agreeable to me, and I was delighted with the idea of spending a year or two in a change of scene and variety of occupations in the absence of my family, during which period some event might happen which would restore me to them in peace and happiness. My promise might be fulfilled, and the monster have departed, or some accident may occur to destroy him and put an end to my slavery forever. These feelings dictated my answer to my father. I expressed a wish to visit England, but, concealing the true reasons of this request, I clothed my desire under the guise of wishing to travel and see the world before I sat down for a life within the walls of my native town. I urged my entreaty with earnestness, and my father was easily induced to comply, for a more indulgent and less dictatorial parent did not exist upon earth. Our plan was soon arranged. I should arrive to Strasbourg, where Clerval would join me. Some short time would be spent in the towns of Holland, and our principal stay would be in England. We should return by France, and it was agreed that the tour should occupy the space of 2 years. Quick drink. My father pleased himself with the reflection that my union with Elizabeth should take place immediately on my return to Geneva. "These 2 years," said he, "will pass very swiftly, and it will be the last delay that will oppose itself to your happiness. And indeed, I earnestly desire that period to arrive, when we shall be united, and neither hopes or fears arrive to disturb our domestic clan." "I am content,"
I replied. With your arrangement. By that time we shall both have become wiser, and I hope happier than we are at the present rate.
I sighed, but my father kindly forbore to question me further concerning the cause of my dejection. He hoped that new scenes and the amusement of traveling would restore my tranquility. I now made arrangements for my journey, but one feeling haunted me, which filled me with fear and agitation. During my absence, I should leave my friends unconscious of the existence of their enemy, and unprotected from his attacks. Exasperated that he might be by my departure, but he had promised to follow me wherever I might go, and would he not accompany me to England? This imagination was dreadful in itself, but soothing, inasmuch as it supposed the safety of my friends. I was agonized with the idea of the possibility that the reverse of this might happen, but through the whole period during which I was slave of my creature, I allowed myself to be governed by the impulses of the moment, and my present sensations strongly intimated that the fiend would follow me, and exempt my family from the danger of his machinations. It was in the latter end of August that I departed to pass 2 years of exile. Elizabeth approved the reasons of my departure and only regretted that she had not the same opportunities of enlarging her experience and cultivating her understanding. She wept, however, as she bade me farewell, and entreated me to return happy and tranquil.
We all, said she, depend on you, and if you are miserable, what must be our feelings?
I threw myself into the carriage that was to convey me away, hardly knowing where I was going, and careless of what was passing around. I remembered only that it was a bitter anguish that I reflected on it, to order that my chemical instruments would be packed to go with me, for I resolved to fulfill my promise while aboard, and return, if possible, a free man. Filled with dreary imaginations, I passed through many beautiful and majestic scenes, but my eyes were fixed and unobserving. I could only think of the bourne of my travels, and the work which was to occupy me while they endured. Sorry, I had a hiccup. While some days spent in listless indolence, during which I travelled many leagues, I arrived at Strasbourg, where I waited 2 days for Clerval. He came. Alas, how great was the contrast between us! He was alive to every new scene, joyful when he saw the beauties of the setting sun, and more happy when he beheld it rise and recommence a new day. He pointed out to me the shifting colours of the landscapes and appearances of the sky. "This is what it is to live," he cried. "Now I enjoy its existence. But you, my dear Frankenstein, wherefore are you desponding and sorrowful?" In truth, I was occupied by gloomy thoughts, and neither saw the descent of the evening star, nor the golden sunrise reflected in the Rhine. And you, my friend, would be far more amused with the journey of Clerval, who observed the scenery with an eye of feeling and delight, than to listen to my reflections. I, the miserable wretch, haunted by a curse that shut up every avenue to enjoyment. We had agreed to descend the Rhine in boat from Strasbourg to Rotterdam, whence we might take shipping for London. During this voyage, we passed by many willowy islands and saw several beautiful towns. We stayed a day at Mannheim, and, on the 5th from our departure from Strasbourg, arrived at Mayence. The course of the Rhine below the Mayence became much more picturesque. The river descends rapidly, and the winds between the hills, not high, but steep, and beautiful forms. We saw many ruined castles standing on the edges of precipices, surrounded by black woods, high and inaccessible. The part of the Rhine, indeed, presents a singularly variegated landscape. In one spot you view rugged hills, ruined castles overlooking tremendous precipices, and the dark Rhine rushing beneath, and, on the sudden turn of a promontory, flourishing vineyards with green sloping banks, and a meandering river and populous towns occupy the scene.
We travelled at the time of the vintage and heard the song of the labourers as we glided down the stream. Even I, depressed in my mind and spirits, continually agitated by gloomy feelings, even I was pleased. I lay at the bottom of the boat, and as I gazed on the cloudless blue sky, I seemed to drink in a tranquility to which I had long been a stranger. And if these were my sensations, who could describe those of Henry? He felt as if he had been transported to fairyland and enjoyed a happiness seldom tasted by man. "I have seen," he said, "the most beautiful scenes of my country. I have visited the lakes of Lucrine and Uri, where the snowy mountains descend almost perpendicularly to the water, casting black and impenetrable shades which would cause a gloomy and mournful appearance, were it not for the most verdant islands that relieve the eye by their gay appearance. I have seen the lake agitated by a tempest, when the wind tore up whirlwinds of water, and gave you an idea of what the waterspout must be on the great ocean, and the waves dashed with fury the base of the mountain, where the priest and his mistress were overwhelmed by an avalanche, and where their dying voices are still said to be heard amidst the pauses of the nightly wind. I have seen the mountains of Valais and the Pays de Vaud, but this country, Victor, pleases me more than all those wonders. The mountains of Switzerland are more majestic and strange, but there is a charm in the banks of this divine river that I never before saw equaled. Look at the castle which overhangs yon precipice, and that also on the island, almost concealed amongst the foliage of those lovely trees, and now that group of labourers coming from among the vines, and the village half hid in the recess of the mountain. Oh, surely the spirit of the inhabitants and the gods this place has more in harmony with man than those pile with the glacier, or retire to the inaccessible peaks of mountains of our own country. Clerval, beloved friend, even now it delights me to record your words, and to dwell on the praise of which you are so eminently deserving. He was being formed in the very poetry of nature. His wild and enthusiastic imagination was chastened by the sensibility of his heart. His soul overflowed with ardent affections, and his friendship was that of devoted and wondrous nature, that the worldly minded teach us to look for only in the imagination. But even human sympathies were not sufficient to satisfy his eager mind. The scenery of external nature, which others regard only with admiration, he loved with ardor. It's a little poem, I think. The sounding cataract haunted him like a passion. The tall rock, the mountain, the deep and gloomy wood, the colours and their forms were then to him an appetite, a feeling, and a love that had no need of a remoter charm, by the thought supplied or any interest, unborrowed from the eye. And where does he now exist? Is this gentle and lovely being lost forever? Has this mind so replete with ideas, imaginations, fanciful and magnificent, which formed a world whose existence depended on the life of its creator? Has this mind perished? Does it now only exist in my memory? No, it is not thus. Your form so divinely wrought and beaming with beauty has decayed, but your spirit still visits and consoles your unhappy friend. Pardon the gush of sorrow. These ineffectual words are but a slight tribute to the unexampled worth of Henry, but they soothe my heart, overflowing with the anguish which his remembrance creates. I'll proceed with my tale. Beyond the Cologne was descended of the plains of Holland, and we resolved to post the remainder of our way. The wind was contrary, and the stream of the river was too gentle to aid us. Our journey here lost the interest arising from the beautiful scenery. But we arrived a few days at Rotterdam, whence we proceeded by sea to England. It was on a clear morning, and in the latter days of December, that I first saw the white cliffs of Britain, The banks of the Thames presented a new scene. They were flat but fertile, and almost every town was marked by the remembrance of some story. We saw Tilbury Fort and remembered the Spanish Armada, Gravesend, Woolwich, and Greenwich, places which I had heard of even in my country. At length we saw numerous steeples of London, St. Paul's towering above all, and the tower framed in English history. Chapter 1. End. So quite a bit happened. That was a long chapter. I didn't think this chapter would be so beefy, but what have we learned here? Victor Frankenstein's dad is an absolute goat. I think we love him. Father of the Year award? His son kind of sucks, but aside from trying to marry him off to his cousin, kind of Father of the Year award. We learned that Victor Frankenstein is having some regrets. We kind of already knew that about creating a wife for the monster, but he is still going through with it. He's going all the way to England, partially to procrastinate, from the sounds of it, but partially to get information to be able to build this wife quicker and without as much stress. He is pulling a gamble on going to England because one of two things are going to happen. Either the monster picks up what he's putting down, even though he never talked to him, and follows him to England to make sure he's still doing the job. Number two, the monster sees him leave abroad and goes, "That bastard, he's running away. I'm gonna kill all his family." We'll see what happens, because I personally don't know how Frankenstein's monster is gonna follow them to England when they need to take boats and stuff. But I mean, Frankenstein's monster doesn't really need a lot, so maybe he can just swim it. Who knows? And also, welcome in on the YouTube side a certain mysterious virtuoso. And also anyone else who has come in during that time, like Shadow Ravens and Popoto. Does he need O2? I'd assume so. But I was thinking more in that, like, I bet he could swim really fast. Like, he can already, like, scale mountains and stuff by himself. And has good physical capabilities. So I'm thinking, like, maybe he's also a strong swimmer. I don't think he knows how to swim. But maybe he'll innately figure it out. It's hard to tell. I am leaning more towards the second thing, where he does think Frankenstein has abandoned him and starts just killing people. But I've never actually finished Frankenstein, so I don't know. I am gonna take another drink, and then we'll get into Volume 3, Chapter 2. Mary Shelley could have written a tourism ad copy for the Victorian Gothic girlies. I know, some of the descriptions are really good here. They really make you want to travel. I've never been like, I need to see the British landscapes, mostly because I am British, but this makes me go, damn, I wish I could go back to Europe. Okay. Chapter 2. London was our present point of rest. We determined to remain several months in this wonderful and celebrated city. Clerval desired the intercourse of the man of genius and talent who flourished at this time. But this was with me a secondary object. I was principally occupied with the means of obtaining the information necessary for the completion of my promise, and quickly availed myself to the letters of introduction that I had brought with me, addressed to the most distinguished natural philosophers. If this journey had taken place during my days of study and happiness, it would have afforded me inexpressible pleasure. But a blight had come over my existence, and I only visited these people for the sake of information they might give me on the subject in which my interest was so terribly profound. Company was irksome to me. When alone, I could fill my mind with the sights of heaven and earth. The voice of Henry soothed me, and I could thus cheat myself into a transitionary peace. But busy, uninteresting, joyous faces brought back despair to my heart. I saw an insurmountable barrier placed between me and my fellow man. This barrier was sealed with the blood of William and Justine, and to reflect on the events connected with those names filled my soul with anguish. But in Clerval, I saw the image of my former self. He was inquisitive and anxious to gain experience and instruction. These differences of manners which he observed was to him an inexhaustible source of instruction and amusement. He was forever busy, and the only check to his enjoyments was my sorrowful and dejected mien. I tried to conceal this as much as possible, that I might not debar him from the pleasures natural to one who was entering on a new scene of life, undisturbed by any care or bitter recollection. I often refused to accompany him, alleging another engagement, that I might remain alone. I now also began to collect the materials necessary for my new creation, and this was to me like the torture of single drops of water continually falling on my head. Every thought that was devoted to it was in extreme anguish, and every word that I spoke in allusion to it caused my lips to quiver and my heart to palpitate. After passing some months in London, we received a letter from a person in Scotland who had formerly been our visitor at Geneva. He mentioned the beauties of his native country and asked us if those were not sufficient allurements to induce us to prolong our journey as far north as Perth, where he resided. Clerval eagerly desired to accept his invitation, and I, although I abhorred society, wished to gain view, again, mountains and streams, and all wondrous works with which nature adorns her chosen dwelling places. We had arrived in England at the beginning of October, and it was now February. We accordingly determined to commence our journey towards the north at the expiration of another month. In this expedition, we did not intend to follow the great road to Edinburgh, but to visit Windsor, Oxford, Matlock, and the Cumberland Lakes, resolving to arrive at the completion of this tour about the end of July. I packed my chemical instruments and the materials I collected, resolving to finish my labours in some obscene nook in the northern highlands of Scotland. We quitted London on the 27th of March and remained a few days at Windsor, rambling in the beautiful forest. This was a new scene to us mountaineers. The majestic oaks, the quantity of game, and the herds of stately deer were all novelties to us. From thence we proceeded to Oxford. As we entered this city, our minds were filled with remembrance of the events that had transacted there more than a century and a half before. It was here that Charles I had collected his forces. This city had remained faithful to him, and the whole nation had forsaken his cause to join the standard of Parliament and liberty. The memory of that unfortunate king and his companions, the amiable Falkland, the insolent Gower, his queen, and his son, gave particular interest to every part of this city, which they might be supposed to have inhabited. The spirit of elder days found a dwelling here, and we delighted to trace its footsteps. If these feelings had not found an imaginary gratification, the appearance of the city had yet in itself sufficient beauty to obtain our admiration. The colleges are ancient and picturesque, the streets are almost magnificent, and the lovely Isis, which flows beside it through meadows of exquisite verdure, is spread forth into a placid expanse of waters, which reflects its majestic assemblage of towers and spires and domes embosomed amongst aged trees. I enjoyed this scene, and yet my enjoyment was embittered both by the memory of the past and the anticipation of the future. I was formed for peaceful happiness. During my youthful days, discontent never visited my mind, and if I was ever overcome by anew, the sight of which is beautiful in nature, or the study of what is excellent and sublime in the productions of man, could always interest my heart and communicate elasticity to my spirits. But I am a blasted tree. The bolt had entered my soul, and I felt then that I should survive to exhibit what I shall soon cease to be. A miserable spectacle of wrecked humanity, pitiable to others and abhorrent to myself. We passed a considerable period of Oxford, rambling amongst its environs, and endeavouring to identify every spot which might relate to the most animating epoch of English history. Our little voyages of discovery were often prolonged by the successive objects that presented themselves. We visited the tomb of the illustrious Hampden, and the field of which that patriot fell. For a moment my soul was elevated from its debasing and miserable fears to contemplate the divine ideas of liberty and self-sacrifice, of which these sites were monuments and remembrancers. For an instant, I dared to shake off my chain and look around me with free and lofty spirit, but the iron had eaten into my flesh, and I sank again, trembling and hopeless, into my miserable self. We left Oxford with regret and proceeded to Matlock, which was our next place of rest. The country in the neighbourhood of this village reassembled, to a greater degree, the scenery of Switzerland, but everything was on a lower scale, and the green hills want the crown of the distant White Alps, which always attend on the piney mountains of my native country. We visited the wondrous cave and the little cabinets of natural history, where the curiosities are disposed in the same manner as in the collections of Servox and Chamonix. The Latin name made me tremble when pronounced by Henry, and I hastened to quit Matlock, with which that terrible scene was thus associated. From Derby, still journeying northward, we passed 2 months in Cumberland and Westmore. I could now almost fancy myself among the Swiss mountains, the little patches of snow which yet lingered on the northern side of the mountains. The lakes and the dashing rocky streams were all familiar and dear sights to me. Here we also made some acquaintances, who almost contrived to cheat me into happiness. The delight of Clerval was proportionably greater than mine, and his mind expanded in the company of men of talent, and he found in his own nature greater capacities and resources than he could have imagined himself to have possessed while he associated with his inferiors. "I could pass my life here," he said to me, "and among these mountains I should scarcely regret Switzerland and Rhine." But he found that a traveller's life is one that includes much pain amidst its enjoyments. His feelings are forever on the stretch, and when he begins to sink into repose, he finds himself self-obliged to quit that on which he rests in pleasure for something new, which again engages his attention, and which also he forsakes for other novelties. We had scarcely visited the various lakes of Cumberland and Westmore, and conceived an affection for some of the inhabitants, when the period of our appointment with our Scotch friend approached, and we left them to travel on. For my own part, I was not sorry. I had now neglected my promise for some time, and I feared the effects of the demon disappointment. He might remain in Switzerland and wreak his vengeance on my relatives. This idea pursued me, and tormented me at every moment from which I might otherwise have snatched repose and peace. I waited for my letters with feverish impatience. If they were delayed, I was miserable and overcome by 1,000 fears, and when they arrived, I saw the superscription of Elizabeth or my father. I hardly dared to read and ascertain my fate. Sometimes I thought that the fiend followed me, and might expedite my remissness by murdering my companion. When these thoughts possessed me, I would not quit Henry for a moment, but followed him as his shadow, to protect him from the fancied rage of his destroyer. I felt as if I had committed some great crime, and the consciousness of which haunted me. I was guiltless, but I had indeed drawn down a horrible curse upon my head, as mortal as that of crime. I visited Edinburgh with languid eyes on my mind, and yet that city might have interested the most unfortunate being. Clerval did not like it so well as Oxford, for the antiquity of the later city was more pleasing to him. But the beauty and regularity of the new town of Edinburgh, its romantic castle, and environs were the most delightful in the world. Arthur's Seat, St. Bernard's, Well, and Pentland Hills compensated him for the change, and filled him with cheerfulness and admiration. but I was impatient to arrive at the termination of my journey. We left Edinburgh in a week, passing through Cupar, St Andrews, and along the banks of the Tay to Perth, where our friend expected us. But I was in no mood to laugh and talk with strangers, or enter into the feelings or plans of good humour expected from a guest, and I accordingly told Clerval that I wished to make tour of Scotland alone.
Do you?
Do you? Said I.
Enjoy yourself and let this be our rendezvous. I may be absent in a month or two, but do not interfere with my motions, I entreat you. Leave me to peace and solitude for a short time, and when I return, I hope it will be with a lighter heart, more congenial to your own temper.
Henry wished to dissuade me, but, seeing me bent on this plan, ceased to remonstrate. He entreated me to write often. I had rather be with you, he said, in your solitary rambles than with these Scotch people, whom I do not know. Hasten, then, my dear friend, to return, that I may again feel myself somewhat at home, which I cannot do in your absence. Having parted from my friend, I determined to visit some remote spot of Scotland, and finish my work in solitude. I did not doubt but that the monster followed me, and I would discover himself to me when I should have finished, that he might receive his companion. With this resolution, I travelled to the Northern Highlands and fixed on one of the remotest of the Orkneys as the scene labours. It was a place fitted for such work, being hardly more than a rock, whose high sides were continually beaten upon by the waves. The soil was barren, scarcely affording pasture for a few miserable cows and oatmeal for its inhabitants, which consisted of 5 persons, whose gaunt and scraggy limbs gave tokens of their miserable fare. Vegetables and bread, when they indulged in such luxuries, and even in fresh water, was to be procured from the mainland, which is about 5 miles distant. On the whole island there was but 3 miserable huts, and one of those was vacant when I arrived. This I hired. It contained but 2 rooms, and these exhibited all the squalidness of the most miserable penury. The thatch had fallen in, the walls were unplastered, and the door was off its hinges. I ordered it to be repaired, brought some furniture, and took possession, an incident which would, doubtless, have occasioned some surprise had not all the senses of the cottagers been numbed by want and squalid poverty. As it was, I lived ungazed at and unmolested, hardly thanked for the pittance of food and clothes which I gave, so much does suffering blunt even the coarsest sensations of men. In this retreat I devoted the morning to labour, but in the evening, when the weather permitted, I walked on the stony beach of the sea, listened to the waves as they roared and dashed at my feet. It was monotonous, yet ever-changing scene. I thought of Switzerland. It was far different from this desolate and appalling landscape. Its hills are covered with vines, and the cottages scattered thickly in the plains. Its fair lakes reflect a blue and gentle sky. When troubled by the winds, their tumult is but as the play of a lively infant, when compared to the roarings of the giant ocean. In this manner I distributed my occupations when I first arrived, but as I proceeded in my labour, it became every day more horrible and irksome to me. Sometimes I could not prevail on myself to enter my laboratory for several days, and other times I toiled day and night in order to complete my work. It was indeed a filthy process in which I was engaged. During my first experiment, a kind of enthusiastic frenzy had blinded me to the horror of my employment. My mind was intently fixed on the sequel of my labour, and my eyes shut to the horror of my proceedings. But now I went to it in cold blood, and my heart often sickened at the work of my hands. Thus situated, employed in the most detestable occupation, my attention from the actual scene in which I was engaged, my spirits became unequal, and I grew restless and nervous. Every moment I feared to meet my persecutor. Sometimes I sat with my eyes fixed on the ground, fearing to raise them, lest I should encounter an object which I dreaded to behold. I feared to wander from the sight of my fellow creatures, lest when alone he should come to claim his companion. In the meantime I worked on, and my labour was already considerably advanced. I looked towards its completion with tremulous and eager hope, which I dared not trust myself to question, but which was intermixed with obscure forebodings of evil that made my heart sicken in my bosom. All right, chapter end. So, Mr. Victor Frankenstein is hard at work trying to... Oh god, the next chapter's a long one. We can make it through one more chapter though, I believe in us. So, Victor Frankenstein's hard at work. He's making that corpse bride for his buddy unnamed monster. They got to go on a nice little tour of England. That was fun. Once again, Clerval best friend goat. Yeah, I'd say Clerval absolute goated best friend. Also, welcome in, Rihanna. Hope you're having a good day. We're getting there. I genuinely, I'm pretty sure he doesn't actually make Frankenstein's Bride, and that's just a Universal movie, but like he's making good process, so I'm not actually sure. Also, I do have a question for what's happening here. Where is he getting the body parts? Because he's on like a little island with only 3 people, so either he brought body parts with him, or he's grave robbing on the small, mostly uninhabited island. I'm not exactly sure where he's getting his materials from here. But I think Mary Shelley didn't intend me to think that hard about it, I don't think. Yeah, maybe old graves, but like, if there's only like 3 people living here, I feel like most of the bodies would be old and like very decomposed, right? That's why I'm like, because at first I was like, oh, he must just be grave robbing here, but I'm like, would the bodies be fresh enough for that? I don't know. We might get an answer, or it might just be one of those don't think too hard about it situations. Okay, I'm gonna just do a quick jaw stretch because I am starting to fumble over some S's, F's, and L's. So I'm gonna just stretch out my jaw and then take a drink, and then we're gonna get into chapter number 3, which will be the last chapter for today for us, because it's been about an hour. This will probably take us to an hour 20. Maybe hour 30. It's a longer chapter. Oh, you know it's bad when you can like hear your jaw cracking as like you're stretching it out. Ooh. Maybe he's ordering the body parts on Amazon. I don't think they had Amazon back in like the 1800s, I'll be honest. Good suggestion, Mel. Back then they were only delivering books. They didn't get into e-commerce the same. Crazy to think about that. Amazon did just used to be like it used to just be like books. I know someone who used to work at Amazon back when it used to be like kind of just a book place. They worked in like I think the European branch in England, I want to say. Crazy though. Crazy how they've blown up and act like they don't know nobody. Okay. I think I'm ready. We're gonna have to take a mid-chapter break because this is a long one, but I should be good to start. Volume 3, Chapter 3. I sat one evening in my laboratory. The sun had set and the moon was just rising from the sea. I had not sufficient light for my employment, and I remained idle in a pause of consideration of whether I should leave my labor for the night or hasten its conclusion by an unremitting attention to it. As I sat, a train of reflection occurred to me, which led me to consider the effects of which I was doing. 3 years before, I was engaged in the same manner, and had created a fiend whose unparalleled barbarity had desolated my heart, and filled it with bitterness remorse. I was now about to form another being, of whose dispositions were alike ignorant. She might become 10,000 times more malignant than her mate, and delight, for its own sake, in murder and wretchedness. He had sworn to quit the neighborhood of man and hide himself in deserts, but she had not, and she, who in all probability was to become a thinking and reasoning animal, might refuse to comply with a compact made before her creation. They might even hate each other. The creature who already loathed his own deformity, and might he not conceive a greater abhorrence for it when it came before his eyes in the female form? She might also turn with disgust from him to the superior beauty of man. She might quit him, and he be again alone, exasperated by the fresh provocation of being deserted by one of his own species. Even if they were to leave Europe and inhabit the deserts of the New World, yet one of the first results of those sympathies for which the demon thirsted would be children, and a race of devils would be propagated upon the earth, who might make the very existence of the species of man a condition precarious and full of terror. Had I a right, for my own benefit, to inflict this curse upon everlasting generations? I had before been moved by the sophisms of the being I created. I had been struck senseless by his fiendish threats, but now, for the first time, the wickedness of my promise burst upon me. I shuddered to think that future ages might curse me as their pest, whose selfishness had not hesitated to buy its own peace at the price, perhaps, of the existence of the whole human race. I trembled, and my heart failed within me, when, on looking up, I saw, by the light of the moonlight, the demon at the casement. A ghastly grin wrinkled his lips as he gazed on me, where I sat fulfilling the task which he had allotted me. Yes, he had followed me in my travels. He had loitered in forest, hid himself in caves, or taken refuge in the wide and desert heaths. And he now came to mark my progress, and claim the fulfillment of my promise. As I looked on him, his countenance expressed the utmost extent of malice and treachery. I fought with a sensation of madness on my promise of creating another like him, and trembling with passion, tore to pieces the thing on which I was engaged. The wretch saw me destroy the creature, on whose existence he had depended for happiness, with a howl of devilish despair and revenge, withdrew. I left the room, and, locking the door, made a solemn vow in my own heart never to resume my labours, and then, with trembling steps, I sought my own apartment. I was alone. None were near me to dissipate the gloom and relieve me from the sickening oppression of the most terrible reveries. Several hours passed, and I remained near my window gazing on the sea. It was almost motionless, the winds were hushed, and all nature reposed under the eye of the quiet moon. A few fishing vessels alone speckled the water, and now and then the gentle breeze wafted the sounds of voices as the fishermen called to one another. I felt the silence, although I was hardly conscious of its extreme profundity until my ear was suddenly arrested by the paddling of oars near shore, and a person landed close to my house. In a few minutes after, I heard the creaking of my door, as if someone endeavoured to open it softly. I trembled from head to foot, and felt a presentiment of who it was, and wished to rouse one of the peasants who dwelt in a cottage not far from mine. But I was overcome by the sensation of helplessness, so often felt in frightful dreams, when you in vain endeavour to fly from an impending danger. I was rooted to the spot. Sorry. I didn't mute in time for that one. Presently, I heard the sound of footsteps along the passage. The door opened, and the wretch whom I dreaded appeared. Shutting the door, he approached me and said in a smothered voice, "You have destroyed the works on which you began. What is it that you intend? Do you dare to break your promise? I have endured toil and misery. I left Switzerland with you. I crept along the shores of the Rhine, among its willowed islands, and over the summits of the hills. I have dwelt many months in the heaths of England, and among the deserts of Scotland. I have endured incalculable fatigue and cold and hunger. Do you dare destroy my hopes?"
Begone! I do break my promise. I will never create another like yourself, equal in deformity and wickedness.
Slave! Before reasoned with you, but you have proved yourself unworthy of my condescension. Remember that I have power. You believe yourself miserable, but I can make you so wretched that the light of day will be hateful to you. You are my creator, but I am your master. Obey.
Give me a second.
The hour of my weakness is past, and the period of your power arrived. Your threats cannot move me to do an act of wickedness, but they confirm me in resolution of not creating a companion in vice. Shall I, in cold blood, set loose upon the earth a demon, whose delight is in death and wretchedness? Begone! I am infirm, and your words will only exasperate my rage.
The monster saw my determination in my face and gnashed his teeth in the impotence of anger. "Shall each man," cried he, "find a wife for his bosom, and each beast have his mate, and I be alone? I had feelings of affection, and they were requited by detestation and scorn. Man, you may hate, but beware. Your hours will pass in dread and misery, and soon the bolt will fall which must ravage from you your happiness forever. Are you to be happy while I grovel in the intensity of my wretchedness? You can blast my other passions, but revenge remains. Revenge henceforth, dearer than light or food. I may die, but first you, my tyrant and tormentor, shall curse the sun which gazes on your misery. Beware, for I am fearless and therefore powerful. I will watch with the willness of a snake, that I may sting with its venom. Man, you shall repent of the injuries you inflict."
Devil, cease! You do not poison the air with these sounds of malice. I have declared my resolution to you, and I am no coward to bend beneath the words. Leave me. I am inexorable.
"It is well I go. But remember, I shall be with you on your wedding night." I started forward and exclaimed,
Villain, before you sign my death warrant, be sure that you yourself are safe.
I would have seized him, but he eluded me, and quitted the house with precipitation. In a few moments I saw him in his boat, which shot across the waters in an arrowy swiftness, and was soon lost amidst the waves. All was again silent, but his words rung in my ears. I burned with rage to pursue the murderer of my peace, and precipitate him into the ocean. I walked up and down my room hastily and perturbed, while my imagination conjured up 1,000 images to torment and sting me. Why had I not followed him, and closed with him in mortal strife? But I had suffered him to depart, and he had directed his course towards the mainland. I shudder to think who might be the next victim sacrificed in his insatiate rage. And again I thought of his words, "I will be with you on your wedding night." That then was the period fixed for fulfillment of my destiny. In that hour I should die, and at once satisfy and extinguish his malice. The prospect did move me to fear, yet when I thought of my beloved Elizabeth, of her tears and endless sorrow, when she should find her lover so barbarously snatched from her, tears, the first I had shed for many months, streamed from my eyes, and I resolved not to fall beneath my enemy at a bitter struggle. The night passed away, and the sun rose from the ocean. My feelings became calmer, and if it may be called calmness when the violence of rage sinks into the depths of despair, I left the house, the horrid scene of the last night's contention, and walked on the beach of the sea, which I almost regarded as an insuperable barrier between me and my fellow creatures. Nay, a wish that such should prove the fact stole across me. I desired that I might pass my life on that barren rock, barely it is true, but uninterrupted by any sudden shock of misery. If I returned, it was to be sacrificed, or to see those who I loved die under the grasp of a demon whom I walked about, a restless spectre, separated from all it loved, and miserable in the separation. When it became noon, the sun rose higher, and I lay down on the grass and was overpowered by a deep sleep. I had been awake the whole of the preceding night. My nerves were agitated, my eyes inflamed by watching and misery. The sleep into which now I sunk refreshed me, and when I awoke, I again felt as if I belonged to a race of human beings like myself, and I began to reflect upon what happened with greater composure. Yet still the words of the fiend rung in my ears like a death knell, and they appeared like a dream, yet distinct and oppressive as reality. I'm going to take a pause right here and just say, it's absolute crazy work that he's only thinking that Frankenstein's the monster is going to kill him on his wedding day, and not once does it cross his mind that Frankenstein might be planning to do the same thing Frankenstein did with the monster's bride to his bride. We'll see what happens, but I'm leaning more towards the latter because it's more of like an eye for an eye. Because I think the monster's gonna just try and make him as miserable as possible, and killing his fiance is probably a good way to do that. The sun had far descended, and I still sat on the shore, satisfying my appetite, which had become ravenous, with an oaten cake, when I saw a fishing boat lying close to me, and one of the men brought me a packet. It contained letters from Geneva, and one from Clerval entreating me to join him. He said that nearly a year had elapsed since we quitted to Switzerland, and France was yet unvisited. He entreated me, therefore, to leave my solitary isle and meet him at Perth in a week from that time, that we might arrange the plan of our future proceedings. This letter, in a degree, recalled me to life, and I determined to quit my island at the expiration of 2 days. Yet, before I departed, there was a task to perform, on which I shuddered to reflect. I must pack my chemical instruments, and for that purpose I must enter the room which had been the scene of my odious work. And I must handle those utensils, the sight of which was sickening to me. The next morning at daybreak, I summoned sufficient courage and unlocked the door of my laboratory. The remains of the half-finished creature, which I destroyed, lay scattered on the floor, and I almost felt as if I had mangled the living flesh of a human being. I paused to collect myself, and then entered the chamber. With trembling hand, I conveyed the instruments out of the room, but I reflected that I ought not to leave the relics of my work to excite the horror and suspicion of the peasants, and I accordingly put them into a basket, with a greater quantity of stones, and, laying them up, determined to throw them into the sea that very night, and in the meantime, I sat upon the beaches, employed in the cleaning and arrangement of my chemical apparatus. Nothing could be more complete than the alteration that had taken place in my feelings since the night of the appearance of the demon. I had before regarded my promise with gloomy despair, as a thing that, with whatever consequences, must be fulfilled. But I now felt as if a film had been taken from before my eyes, and that I, for the very first time, saw clearly. The idea of renewing my labours did not for one instant occur to me. The threat I had heard weighed on my thoughts, but I did not reflect that a voluntary act of mine could avert it. I had resolved in my own mind to create another fiend, like the first one I had made. That to create another fiend I had first made would be an act of the basset, of the most atrocious selfishness, and I banished from my mind every thought that could lead to a different conclusion. Between 2 and 3 in the morning, the moon rose, and I then, putting my basket aboard a little skiff, sailed out about 4 meters from the shore. The scene was a perfect solitary. A few boats were returning towards land, but I sailed away from them. I felt as if I was about the commission of a deadly crime, and avoided with shuddering anxiety any encounter with my fellow creatures. At one time the moon, which had before been clear, was suddenly overspread by a thick cloud, and I took advantage of that moment of darkness and cast my basket into the sea. I listened to the gurgling sound as it sunk, and then sailed away from the spot. The sky had become clouded, and the air was pure, although chilled by the northeast breeze that was then rising. But it refreshed me, and filled me with such an agreeable sensations that I resolved to prolong my stay on the water, and fixing the rudder in a direct position, stretched myself at the bottom of the boat. Clouds hid the moon, and everything was obscure, and I only heard the sound of the boat as its keel cut through the waves. The murmur lulled me, and in a short time I slept soundly. I do not know how long I remained in this situation, but when I awoke, I found that the sun had already mounted considerably. The wind was high, and the waves continually threatened the safety of my little skiff. I found that the wind was northeast, and must have driven me far from the coast of which I had embarked. I endeavoured to change my course, but quickly found that if I again made the attempt, the boat would instantly fill with water. Thus situated, my only resource was to drive before the wind. I confess that I felt few sensations of terror. I had no compass with me, and was so little acquainted with the geography of this part of the world that the sun was of little benefit to me. I might be driven into the wild Atlantic, and feel all tortures of starvation, or be swallowed up by the immeasurable waves that roared and buffeted around me. I had already been out many hours, and felt the torment of a burning thirst, a prelude to my other sufferings. I looked on the heavens, which were clouded by clouds that flew before the wind, only to be replaced by others. I looked upon the sea, and it was to be my grave.
"Fiend!" I exclaimed. "Your task is already fulfilled."
I thought of Elizabeth, of father, and of Clerval, and sunk into a reverie, so despairing and frightful that even now, when the scene is on the point of closing before me forever, I shudder to reflect on it. Some hours passed thus, but by degrees, as the sun declined towards the horizon, the wind died away in a gentle breeze, and the sea became free from breakers. But these gave place to a heavy swell. I felt sick, and hardly able to hold the rudder, when suddenly I saw a line of high land towards the south. Almost spent as I was by fatigue and the dreadful suspense I endured for several hours, the sudden certainty of life rushed like a flood of warm joy to my heart, and tears gushed from my eyes. How immutable are our feelings, and how strange is that clinging love we have of life, even in the excess of misery. I constructed another sail with part of my dress, and eagerly steered my course towards the land. It had a wild and rocky appearance, but as I approached nearer, I easily perceived the traces of cultivation. I saw vessels near the shore, and found myself suddenly transported back to the neighborhood of civilized man. I eagerly traced the windings of land, and hailed a steeple, which I at length saw issuing from behind a small promontory. As I was in a state of extreme debility, I resolved to sail directly towards the town as a place where I could most easily procure nourishment. Fortunately, I had money with me. As I turned the promontory, I perceived a small neat town at a good harbour, which I had entered, my heart bounding with joy at my unexpected escape. As I was occupied in fixing the boat and arranging the sails, several people crowded towards the spot. They seemed very much surprised at my appearance, but, instead of offering me any assistance, whispered together with gestures that any other time might have produced in me a slight sensation of alarm. As it was, I merely remarked that they spoke English, and I therefore addressed them in that language.
"My good friends," said I, "will you be so kind to tell me the name of this town, and inform me where I am?"
"You will know soon enough," replied a man with a gruff voice. Maybe you are come to a place that will not prove much to your taste, but you will not be consulted as to your quarters, I promise you. I was exceedingly surprised to be on receiving so rude an answer from a stranger. Oh my god, I don't know how to get Discord not to send messages to my phone during this. Sorry. Try not to have buzzing in the background. I was exceedingly surprised to be on receiving so rude an answer from a stranger, and I was also disconcerted on perceiving the frowning and angry countenances of his companions.
Why do you answer me so roughly? I replied. Surely it is not the custom of Englishmen to receive strangers so inhospitably.
I do not know, said the man, what custom of the English may be, but it is the custom of the Irish to hate villains. While this strange dialogue continued, I perceived the crowd rapidly increase. Their faces expressed a mixture of curiosity and anger, which annoyed and to some degree alarmed me. I inquired the way to the inn, but no one replied. I then moved forward, and a murmuring sound arose from the crowd as they followed and surrounded me. When an ill-looking man approaching, tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Come, sir, you must follow me to Mr. Kerwin's and give an account for yourself."
Who is Mr. Kerwin? Why am I to give an account for myself? Is this not a free country?
Aye, sir, free enough for honest folks. Mr. Kerwin is a magistrate, and you are to give an account of the death of a gentleman who was found murdered here last night. The answer startled me, but I presently recovered myself. I was innocent. That could easily be proved. Accordingly, I followed my conductor in silence and was led to one of the best houses in town. I was ready to sink from fatigue and hunger, but being surrounded by a crowd, I thought it politic to rouse all my strength, that no physical debility might be construed into apprehension or conscious guilt. Little did I then expect the calamity that was in a few months to overwhelm me and extinguish in horror and despair all fear and ignominy of death. I must pause here, for it requires all my fortitude to recall the memory of the frightful events I am about to relate in proper detail to my recollection. Chapter end. Ooh, we're ending on a cliffhanger today. Scary. It's... You know, I guess if someone got murdered and then someone, like, washed up on shore the next day, I don't know. I would be like, that's a weird coincidence. I don't think my mind would immediately be like, oh, you killed him, you're the murderer. Because, like, dude literally just sailed there. Unless they think he left, tried to sail away, and came back? It's a bit weird. But we'll have to find out next week. Because that's all I can handle for today. Usually we get through either an hour or like an hour 20 for these. You sure it would have been Drek, but man, it's a shame we never got Javier Bardem as the monster, like Dark Universe Frankenstein movie on it. Ooh. But yeah, it looks like the monster's been through this town and has caused some problems, which have now come. Oh, you know what it might be? Maybe everyone's like, because even though he's just landed there, like literally just got to town, maybe Frankenstein's monster has like placed some writings or maybe like a photograph of Victor. So everyone's looking at that like, we saw proof of you. Oh my god, it's probably Clerval who's dead. It's probably Clerval who's dead because we already got like, you know when like Victor kind of broke and he's like, sorry, I'm just like getting really worked up over Clerval right now. Remembering him. I bet it's Clerval who's dead. And Clerval probably had like stuff about Victor on him. So that like these two guys knew each other. He must have been the one who killed him. I don't know. It's scary. But that's all we have time for today. Which means we're gonna go raid out. We're gonna go find someone to raid. It's gonna be a mystery. I don't know who's streaming today. We'll find out very shortly as I open up Twitch and then promptly mute it so we don't hear the front page people. I wish there was a way to not have the front page automatically play because it's annoying when I open it up and I'm like, oh god.
people I don't gaff about. Oh, we don't have many options today. Usually we raid into Sleepy, but I guess Sleepy is not streaming today. I'm trying to find something with like a calm vibe. Because I don't want to like send you into someone playing like an FPS. Or being loud. It might be illusion of choice today. The monster spraying Ireland sucks from Victor on the murder scene. Alright, it's an illusion of choice day just because I don't know where to send you. That's not going to be a strong vibe shift. Okay. But thank you for coming out. Next Wednesday we should be good for continuing more Frankenstein. But for now, I have to go finish some cleaning. And eventually go to bed. But thank you for coming. I'll see you on Friday. On Friday we're playing Guilty as Sock with some friends. That'll be a bunch of fun. But yeah. I'm getting sleepy. I can't coherent word anymore. Get out of here. Bye.